Good morning, everyone. Jane Monreal here with you at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning. You're watching Live Impact News on WCNC Plus, where we bring you the top headlines as they come into the WCNC newsroom. From your local news, we will get you caught up with what's happening in Monroe as they had a special council meeting earlier this morning. We're talking really early. As well as your national headlines. Of course, President Trump coming off Flag Day and his birthday and a military parade being held in Washington, D.C. Now in his first full day for the G7 summit in Canada. Alice Barr has the latest that is previously recorded on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus.
Trump turning to the world stage today in Canada at the Group of Seven summit of top allies amid mounting concerns over a new round of attacks between Israel and Iran. President Trump hoping for a deal to de-escalate.
Sometimes they have to fight it out, but we're going to see what happens. I think there's a good chance there'll be a deal.
While promising to keep supporting Israel's defense.
American pilots are shooting down drones that are headed towards Israel.
Iran has threatened to strike American military targets if the U.S. continues that assistance to Israel. Lawmakers sounding off.
The United States has troops, facilities, and civilians in the region. Do not attack them. That is our red line. If you go there, all bets are off.
Many defending Israel's goal of destroying Iran's ability to make a nuclear weapon, while still calling to prioritize diplomacy.
And bring the two sides together, as well as protecting U.S. personnel.
U.S. embassy offices in Israel are closed today. That U.S. official tells NBC President Trump rejected a recent proposal from Israel to assassinate Iran's supreme leader. The growing conflict expected to be a central topic among the G7 allies gathering in Canada, while here at home, boiling domestic divisions on display at weekend protests across the country against Trump administration policies, timed to counter the military parade in Washington, marking the Army's 250th anniversary that coincided with the president's 79th birthday. In Washington, Alice Barr, NBC News.
Our other big story over the weekend and late last night, developments in the manhunt for the suspected shooter of two lawmakers in Minnesota in the early hours of Saturday morning. I'll get you caught up there because Jay Gray was covering things on what led up to the discovery of this suspect.
After more than 40 hours on the run, tactical teams close in, capturing Vance Belter overnight.
There's no question that this is the largest manhunt in the state's history.
Federal, state, and local agencies searching for the man they say murdered State Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark, and in a separate attack, severely injuring State Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette. Bullet holes from that shooting visible through their front door. The break in the case came Sunday afternoon. Officers locating an abandoned car Belter is suspected of using after the attacks in a rural area about 50 miles southwest of Minneapolis and just minutes from his home. Then, after a tip from a resident, honing in, tracking, and surrounding Belter.
The suspect crawled to law enforcement teams and was placed under arrest at that point in time. There was no use of force by any member of law enforcement.
Agents say Belter was armed when he was taken into custody. A criminal complaint unsealed after his arrest shows police found at least 3 AK-47 rifles, a 9mm pistol, and a kill list in his car, a ballistic vest, mask, and police-style badge on the ground outside the vehicle. Evidence, and what police stress, is still an open and active investigation.
Now begins the hard work of looking at what the motive is, looking at putting this case together.
As the Twin Cities struggle with overwhelming loss. Jay Gray, NBC News, St. Paul, Minnesota.
Right now, it appears that the Religious Liberty Commission's meeting is happening this morning. It is a first hearing, and Attorney General Pam Bondi is making opening remarks. We're going to take you out here. This is happening live right now out of Washington, D.C. You're watching Live Impact News on WCNC Plus.
This is on religious liberty. Once the President was sworn in and his staff was in place and the cabinet members were confirmed, we started in earnest working on this commission in March. It took several weeks to write the executive order, and on May 1st, the National Day of Prayer, we were in the Rose Garden, many of us, and the commission was officially announced with the executive order and the members of the commission. We also have advisory boards that are made up of scholars, historians, clergy that will advise us along the way, and some of those are here with us today. I want to thank Susie Wiles, the Chief of Staff to the President, who set up the Faith Office, of which Paula White, who is with us, is the Senior Advisor to the President. And I want to thank Vince Haley, the domestic, he's in charge of domestic policy, who has been instrumental in establishing this with Paula and the Faith Office. I want to thank Brittany Baldwin and Mary Margaret Bush, who created this set for us today. I want to thank the Museum of the Bible for allowing us to hold this hearing here, and we're going to have someone from the museum speak a little later in the afternoon about a fascinating story of the Bible in America. And most importantly, I want to thank the President for entrusting all of us, inviting all of us to serve, and for me to chair this great commission. Our plan is to have 7 to 9 hearings. The next hearing will be in September, and you'll get notice on that in October, November, then in February, March, and April. And our charter clearly says we have 2 roles. That is to advise and report to the President. A presidential commission does not report to Congress, but the findings from our committees will be reported to the President to see what action would happen after that. So with that, I'm honored to introduce our Vice Chair, Dr. Ben Carson, my longtime friend, and we're going to go around and have every member give opening remarks, and I'll introduce each of you after Dr. Carson. Dr. Carson.
Human beings are more than flesh and blood. We have a spiritual component that is recognized by all religions. If we had only evolved from a slime pit filled with promiscuous biochemicals, there would be no mechanism or reason for a spiritual component, and we would be like all other animals. That distinction is a privilege and has led to many different belief systems, virtually all of which influence behavioral norms. Those behavioral norms help establish a moral code, which in turn promotes civilization. Imagine trying to live in a society with no moral code. This commission promotes freedom of beliefs and that spiritual aspect of our existence that advances civilization. We will strive to facilitate the maintenance of one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dr. Carson. Next is Bishop Barron. He's an author, speaker, theologian. Bishop Robert Barron reaches millions of people around the world on his Word on Fire ministry. Since 2023, Bishop Barron has served as the bishop of the Diocese of Winona, Rochester, and Minnesota. Bishop.
Thanks very much, and good morning, everybody. It's a privilege to serve on this commission. As I do so, I'm standing in the tradition of Father Hesburgh of Notre Dame, who I understand was on 16 separate presidential commissions back in the 20th century. So I think it's an important role that a church person can play in this lively public conversation, and especially around this issue of religious liberty, which has been very important for the U.S. bishops for the past many decades. I've served on our committee on religious liberty for the past about 5 years, so we've taken it very seriously. My own conviction is that we've got a very special battle today. There's a texture to the way religion is being attacked in our society. It's coming from a Arenian philosophy that Joseph Ratzinger, Pope Benedict XVI, called the dictatorship of relativism. I'd call it the culture of self-invention. The complete prioritization given to individual autonomy, that we decide value, we decide meaning, we decide purpose. And I think that philosophy, which is becoming, as I say, increasingly influential in our society, rightly appreciates the classical religions as the chief opponent. Because we stand for objective moral values, we stand for God as the ground of those values, we stand for a sense of a stable human nature. And I think the rival philosophy rightly sees that as the opponent. And so I've been watching it for the past many years. I was bishop out in California for 6 years. An attempt to get religion out of public life, to get religion out of healthcare, to get it out of education. So I think that's the battle that we're in. And it's a battle, now put it in very American terms, for religious liberty, our first freedom. And so both as an American and as a Catholic bishop, I'm delighted to be part of that struggle, that conversation. So that's why I'm happy to be on this commission.
Thank you, Bishop. Carrie Bowler, former Miss California USA and Miss USA first runner-up in 2009. Carrie is the author of Still Standing, Still Standing, The Untold Story of My Fight Against Gossip, Hate, and Political Attacks. Carrie.
Can you hear me? Yes. Thank you, members of the Commission. I come before you not just to speak about a constitutional right, but about a sacred trust, religious liberty, rooted in the very soul of our nation. From the beginning, Christian faith shaped our understanding of freedom, law, and human dignity. The Declaration of Independence affirms that our rights come from our Creator, not from government, but from God Himself. George Washington, in his farewell address, spoke plainly. All of the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion, and morality are indispensable supports. He urged us not to suppose that morality could be maintained without religion. John Adams warned that our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. And John Jay, our first Chief Justice, reminded us, Providence has given our people the choice of their rulers, and it is the duty to prefer Christians for their rulers. These weren't abstract ideals, they were lived convictions. For nearly 200 years, school children across this country learned to read from the New England Primer, a Christian textbook, which taught them not just the alphabet, but the Word of God, moral lessons and prayers. This was not indoctrination, it was formation. It was understood that a free people must be a virtuous people, and virtue begins with truth. Since prayer and the Bible were removed from our schools, morality has dropped across America. Today, as our culture questions the very foundation we were built on, we must ask, do we want to leave our children and grandchildren a nation our founders did not create? Because protecting religious freedom isn't just about securing a right. It is about guarding the spiritual legacy that has held this country together since its birth. We have a moral and religious duty to ensure religious freedom in America. And with that duty comes hope for America, for our future, and for the enduring strength of religious liberty. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Dr. Ryan Anderson is the president of Ethics and Public Policy Center. He is also the author or co-author of 5 books, including several related to religious liberty. Dr. Anderson.
Great, thank you. And it's a real honor and privilege to get to serve on this commission, and I'm grateful to President Trump for the appointment. I just wanted to highlight 4 things that I hope we as a commission will be able to explore during the coming year. First are the philosophical and theological roots of religious liberty. I think it's important to understand that religious liberty matters because religion matters, because we are creatures and we owe obligations to the Creator. This is how James Madison put it in his Memorial and Remonstrance, that there's a duty that we as creatures owe to the Creator, and that's what then creates the rights amongst men, which governments are then instituted to protect. Second, I think it'll be important for us to defend a robust scope of religious liberty. Too many voices recently have reduced it merely to the freedom of worship, or you see it in mainstream media referred to so-called religious liberty, or religious liberty in scare quotes. Other voices want to say religious liberty is only for people of my particular confession, whatever that confession happens to be. And then I just think the startling rise, the resurgence of anti-Semitism that we have seen, particularly on college campuses, particularly on elite college campuses. I think George Washington's letter to the Hebrew congregation of Newport, Rhode Island is so important. It's no longer that toleration is spoken of, right? He's digging at John Locke right there. The Jewish people get to exercise their inherent natural rights. The U.S. government gives to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance. So a robust scope for religious liberty. Third, that we explore the new threats to religious liberty. I think what we're seeing right now the primary threats to religious liberty are unjust laws in the first place. And so exemptions from unjust laws won't be a sufficient remedy, but we actually need to think through what just laws would look like. And then lastly, and Carrie just touched on this, the importance of religious liberty in the public square. This isn't merely the right to worship in the privacy of your chapel or your home, but to bring your religious values into the public square for discussions of public justice and the common good. I think the attempts to create what my old boss referred to as the naked public square by some secularist voices has been a disaster. It, in essence, is denying robust religious liberty to people of faith to exercise their religious liberty in the public square. So I hope we can touch on all four of those things in the coming year. And again, it's a real honor to be able to serve the country in this way.
Thank you, Doctor.
You are watching live
Kelly
now on
Shackelford,
Live Impact News on
my longtime
WCNC
friend,
Plus. A
back in
commission
Texas,
hearing for the
is
Religious
President and
Liberty
Chief
Group.
Executive Officer of
AG
First Liberty
Pam Bondi
Institute. He's
is
a
set to
constitutional
speak
scholar
as
who's argued
the
before
guest
the
speaker
Supreme
for
Court a
opening
number of times
remarks.
on
We'll get back
religious
to
liberty
that
issues.
here on Live Impact News. In the meantime, at this this morning, we want to talk about a unique national initiative. It's called Civic Season 2025.
By God's grace.
This movement running from Juneteenth to July 4th. It's going to aim to encourage dialogue, really, and civic engagement, particularly among young Americans. In Charlotte, there are several free community events that you can participate in to talk about our nation's past, present, and future. And joining us right now is the Chief Education and Strategic Partnership Officer at the Levine Museum of the New South, Val Brown, to bring us all of what we need to know. Val, thanks for joining us here in the Live Impact studio this morning.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, let's get started with what the civic season is. How did this come about?
Well, I'm sure you can remember your last formal civics class was probably in middle school, but as a 13 and 14-year-old, you're expected to carry that out for the rest of your life, right? Mm-hmm. And so civic season, inspired by the work of Made by Us, a national organization in partnership with cultural institutions like the Levine Museum of the New South, have said we want to focus on this moment in time to capture not only young people, but all people around these ideas about what it means to be engaged in your community.
That's fantastic. What role did young people play then in developing this concept?
Oh, they were the masterminds behind this work. They recognized that there was a moment that they could really engage not only other young people, but adults as well. And I say adults, so we're talking about adults of all ages, where they could really engage them in conversations that are meaningful to them in this moment where we have Juneteenth as one end and July 4th, where people are already thinking about many of these ideas.
So let's talk about some of the specific events locally from the Levine Museum of the New South. You guys did wrap up your Juneteenth Festival of the Carolinas this past weekend. How did that go?
Yes, so we joined the Juneteenth Festival of the Carolinas, who has been a part of the community for more than 2 decades. And so we were there at that event. It was wonderful to get in touch with people who were there. One really important message that I heard on Sunday, yesterday, was that we have to resist the Great Divide. And I think that's really what this is about. How do we bring communities together to talk about things that improve our local community and our state?
And what came out of that conversation?
Yeah, so a lot of people were excited about just even being a part of the community, right? And so getting to know one another, what opportunities there are to get engaged. And a lot of people were like, hey, we would love to hear about what the museum is doing and how we can continue this conversation.
That's fantastic. You have a slice of history coming up this week. Tell us a little bit about that.
I'm super excited about that, and also my teenage kids are also super excited about this. But at 7th Street Market, our good friends at 7th Street Market invited us in, and we're going to have free pizza and trivia around local. I know, you get that slice.
Say no
right?
more.
You and trivia around local Charlotte history, and again, it's an opportunity to engage in the community and learn a little bit. We recognize that there are so many people moving to Charlotte every day, and so it's good to know the community in which you reside.
All right, so we're looking at the website here, Slice of History, that is coming up tomorrow.
That's right.
At 11:30, so perfect for your lunch hour.
That's right.
We do have to register?
Yes, register, but that's just so we know how many people are coming.
Okay.
We would love to be flooded. And it's first come, first served with the pizza.
Okay, all right, yes, good to know. All right,
Yes.
so be there, be first, get your pizza on. And then the Democracy Happy Hour. This sounds intriguing as well, Val.
I am so excited about Democracy Happy Hour. One of my love languages is nuanced conversations, and this is an opportunity to engage in that way. And so we have special coasters designed in partnership with Educating for American Democracy, where they have questions that we are really going to generate conversation with our community members. I don't want to give you too much because I want people to come in, but I will say that we practice these conversations as a family, and with just 2 questions, we ended up talking for 40 minutes over dinner, and that's with a 15 and 17-year-old. And so I think that really shows how powerful these conversations are and how much they're needed.
For someone who might be hesitant to get involved in conversations like this or participate in events or civic events like this, what do you say to encourage them?
Oh, okay. So first of all, this is entry for everyone. And so this is an invite only. This is a place where we recognize people have different levels of comfort in engaging these conversations. And I said I wasn't going to give you too much, but I'm going to give you one question that we're asking there. But why does civic engagement matter in a healthy democracy? And again, this is a low entry point for anyone to really grapple with what they're thinking about, because too often we don't have these conversations in community with others. And I think it's really important to do that so that we surface some of these things that we believe and we recognize that we are probably more alike than different in many ways.
Good point, Val. As we approach the nation's 250th birthday anniversary, what do you hope Charlotte area residents to take away from participating in civic season?
Oh, so this is our first year engaging in civic season, and I am very excited about the future. I recognize this as a true initiative to bring communities together. So my one wish for the 250th is that this initiative grows, that many people recognize there's an opportunity to stay civically involved, and that you can do that in ways that are local, right there in your neighborhoods, all the way up to wherever your dreams take you. We also have the opportunity as part of a national effort to engage with the 250th Wish Wall. So this is a digital wish wall where we have had folks populating for the last month, just around the country, their wishes for the next 250 years for this country. And so what you will see when you log on to make your wish is a lot of inspiring and positive things about the places we can go that benefit all.
Fantastic. Val Brown from the Levine Museum of the New South, helping foster democratic participation during this civic season and really showing us the role of what museums, our local museums, play in how we think and we can discuss and foster activity and civic participation. Val, anything else we want to know?
I just want to thank you all for having us, and please come on out early and often to all of our events.
Sounds good. We'll put up the website as well on WCNC.com if you want to get involved. And we have a happy hour coming up.
That's right.
And food, a slice of history, tomorrow at the market at 7. Thanks, Val.
Thank you.
All right, back out here in the Live Impact studio now. That was a great start to your Monday morning. We'll get you back out to the Religious Liberty Commission hearing where AG Pam Bondi is set to make some opening remarks. Moments ago, we did see Dr. Phil there for a bit, Carlene. He's not involved in the opening remarks, but apparently
he's a part of the
conversation here for the Religious Liberty Commission. Okay, let's go ahead and listen in here live on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus.
To him, and that he wanted to make it such an important part to people in America. Religious liberty is the bedrock of the founding of our country. It allows freedom to practice our faith, and every one of us have that right, as heard so many times by all of the members here, to approach God and to worship Him freely. And that's what's made our country flourish from the very beginning. President Trump has tasked the White House Faith Office with ensuring that religious liberty is protected for future generations. But we see that in recent years, some federal, some state, many people have, Kelly, my friend here, has fought so many times in the Supreme Court and fought for people who were violated for this. Local policies have threatened America's beautiful tradition of religious liberty, and that should not be so. Houses of worship have been attacked, have been shut down. Employees have been fired over their faith. Religious liberties or religious entities have been debanked. Parental rights have been violated. Who would have ever thought that in the very beginning, President Trump would have to pardon 23 pro-lifers for standing outside of an abortion clinic and praying silently? Or that the FBI would spy on our traditional Catholic Church? Or that a coach who would kneel on the side of a football field would have to fight all the way up to the Supreme Court to silently pray? I'm 59 years old, and that's not the America that I grew up in. We have a lot of work to do, and I believe that this task force will do it, or this commission will do it. As President Trump has said in his speeches and presidential documents, he is committed to vigorously enforce all federal laws protecting religious liberty. He'll defend that fundamental freedom with absolute devotion, and this commission will play a crucial role in helping the president fulfill these commitments. While the President and the White House Faith Office are working quickly to eradicate immediate threats to religious liberty, the Commission will focus on long-term strategies to secure religious freedom for future generations. We will gather data, conduct legal analysis, hold public hearings to capture the stories of everyday Americans related to religious liberty. And this work will ensure that the administration has the best researched, most comprehensive understanding of the current state of America's religious liberty in our nation's history. The hearings held, research conducted, and data gathered by this commission will be invaluable to President Trump, and it's so vitally important to him and to the White House Faith Office to develop and execute a long-term strategy to protect religious freedoms for all Americans of all faiths for all times. And in conclusion, we must protect and defend our freedom to practice religion with every single fiber of our being, to keep people and the country strong without fear of government discrimination. All people of faith have the right to have their voice in government. 40 years in ministry now, I've been all over the world to almost 140 countries, and my greatest fight has been for religious liberty. It's an honor, Chairman.
Thank you, Pastor. Rabbi Meir Solovachik. Rabbi?
Thank you, Chairman Patrick, for your leadership. Thank you to Vice Chair Carson and to my distinguished colleagues on this commission. I want to begin by expressing my gratitude to the President of the United States for charging us with this important task. In 1788, a parade was held in Philadelphia to celebrate Pennsylvania's ratification of the Constitution. It was attended by Benjamin Rush, founding father, famous physician, devout Christian, signer of the Declaration of Independence. Rush recorded an aspect of the procession that impressed him above all, which was the participation of the city's clergy, which included 3 individuals walking together, what Rush described as, quote, the rabbi of the Jews locked in the arms of 2 ministers of the gospel. Rush reflected that this was, quote, a most delightful sight. There could not have been a more happy emblem contrived of that section of the new Constitution which opens its powers and offices alike, not only to every sect of Christians, but worthy men of every religion. So Rush wrote. And this event truly captured, I think, the uniquely American understanding of religious freedom, which is that it does not seek a secular civic space. It welcomes faith into society in all of its multifaceted forms, never asking of Americans that if we seek to be part of the polity, we check our observances at the door. For to do so would be to amputate the most essential part of ourselves. We bring our faith with us into society, for it is faith that fuels and inspires and guides our engagement with the civic realm. This, of course, as my friend Dr. Anderson mentioned, is the essential difference between so-called freedom of worship, which implies that religion is reserved for the sanctuary, and the genuinely American form of religious liberty that we know as free exercise. Yet over the years, this important distinction in the founders' approach to faith and freedom has been lost or ignored or elided or deliberately denied within the academy, in many state legislatures, and for some period of time the same could be said consequentially for the courts. Recently, the Supreme Court has paved a path to a more accurate and original understanding of the American conception of liberty, as well as the role of faith in the fabric of our society. But there remains so much work still to be done. Benjamin Rush tells us that at the parade, quote, the clergy formed a very agreeable part of the procession. They manifested, he wrote, by their attendance, their sense of the connection between religion and good government. It is rediscovering this connection that is the calling of our commission, and I feel profoundly privileged to be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Allison Ho is partner of Gibson, Dunn, and Crutcher. Allison Ho has established herself as one of the United States' premier appellate lawyers. She has presented over 100 oral arguments in federal and state courts nationwide, including 5 cases before the U.S. Supreme Court. Allison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm profoundly grateful to President Trump for establishing this important commission and deeply humbled to serve on it. The First Amendment is often called the first freedom because it's the foundation of individual liberty in our great nation. Courage is often called the first virtue because it's the one that guarantees all the rest. As an attorney, I've been blessed to advocate for everyday Americans who exemplify the first virtue, courage, by fighting for the first freedom, religious liberty, often at great cost to themselves, their families, and their livelihoods. But too often, the courage of these individuals is woefully lacking in the judges who decide their cases. Some judges hide behind procedural rules and judge-made doctrines to avoid deciding these cases at all. In one case about a veteran's memorial in the shape of a cross, a judge suggested that the defenders of the memorial should appease those it offended by, quote, chopping the arms off the memorial cross. That's not the Babylon Bee, that's an Article 3 judge. I pray this commission will serve with the courage of the everyday Americans who fight for our first freedom, of our president, who has made the first freedom a cornerstone of his administration, and of our founders, who established a priceless legacy of religious freedom. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Allison. As chair of this committee, when we were in the Rose Garden with the president, I couldn't help but think of where I grew up, 48 miles north of the Rose Garden in the inner city Baltimore, in a 12-foot wide home with marble steps. And how did I get to the Rose Garden? As a kid, I never thought I'd even meet a president or ever visit the White House. And how was I selected for this? Only in America and only through God. We have one of the most robust religious communities of faith anywhere in the world. Our religious faith in this country lifts up people. It funds hospitals, food pantries. It helps the homeless, those addicted to alcohol and drugs. A community of faith is a great thing, not a good thing, and our founders knew that. We should take stock of why did that happen in this country? Why in this country and no other place in the world? We are the leaders in our charitable giving to countries all around the world. We are the first ones there. It wasn't an accident. It was by design. Our founders based a government built on the Bible that protects the individual and their freedoms and their liberty to worship God as they choose, or not at all if they choose, but individual rights. And they wrote the First Amendment to protect our inalienable rights and of free expression. But they were wise enough not to have a government that dictated or established a religion. That was their wisdom, but rather let it be to each individual on their own conscience and their own beliefs of how they should worship and how they should pray. Then they guaranteed this magnificent inheritance of religious liberty to us all. And this commission, in part with the president's guiding, is so that we all in America can reclaim that inheritance that our founders gave us. The Declaration of Independence is consistent with the Bible, and the Bible is consistent with the Declaration of Independence, but many Americans are rightly confused. They don't know, because of decades of court cases that often were in direct opposition to what our founders believed and said, have taken away their religious liberty. Where can I pray? When can I pray? Who can I pray to? Because this commission is about all faiths. Can I wear a religious symbol to work, and will the boss tell me to take it off? And is that his right or my right? Will the HOA tell me I can't display a symbol based on my faith on my own property? The commission will answer those questions and many more questions over the next year. We want to let America know you have a great inheritance of religious liberty. And this commission over this time will free you to be free to pray where and when you want. The book of Jude is one of the smallest books in the Bible. It's only 600 words. It's next to Revelations at the end. And it's different from the other books because the other Gospels were, for the most part, for non-believers. But Jude spoke to the believers. And there's a line in there that I love. He says we must contend earnestly. In modern day parlance, that would be we must fight for our right. This commission, on behalf of the President and the people of this country, and God Almighty, will contend earnestly for religious liberty. A little bit later, we will have a guest from our Attorney General. It will be the Attorney General, Pam Bondi. We serve under the Department of Justice, so we are honored that she will join us. As you can imagine, she has a very busy schedule, and she will join us sometime a little bit later this morning or early afternoon. With that, I want to call our first two witnesses. Mark Rienzi and Professor Gerald Bradley, would you step up to the witness table? Mark Rienzi is CEO and president of Beckett, a nonprofit public interest law firm dedicated to defending the religious freedom of people of all faiths. Mr. Rienzi.
And you are watching live right now what is happening in Washington, D.C., a gathering for the Religious Liberty Commission. They have their first hearing with a lot of special guests, including, as you heard, Attorney General Pam Bondi, who is expected to stop by and make some opening remarks either later this morning or early this afternoon. We'll bring that to you when she appears there in the panel on Live Impact News on WCNC+. But right now at 9:38, get ready here in the Charlotte area to ramp up for some humidity. My hair is frizzing up. Look at that. That's what it does. It looks great. Thank you, Carlene, but it's just not the way.
I also vote great as well.
It looks great.
Yes, I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, what's happening, Chris?
It's a great hair day for Jane is what's happening.
Never.
That's what we're talking about. Even though the moisture values say differently, but Jane's the exception in this room. And Carlene, of course.
Thank you. Yeah.
Me, not so much. Actually, I'm a little bit poofier than normal, too. Yeah.
You got volume.
Yeah, no, I definitely have voluminous hair,
Yes.
to say the least, especially this time, like a couple weeks before the haircut. But yeah, let's get right to it. Since you brought up moisture, here is our muggy meter. Anything 65 is humid, anything 70 is muggy. Where jokingly we actually ran through our thesaurus for other ways to describe how hot and humid it was. So let's actually bring that up.
Muggy?
Yeah, muggy. Well, no, we don't want to use muggy. So I have swampy, steamy, soupy, soggy, clammy, stuffy, sticky, saturated, soppy, nasty.
Yeah. Nice.
Nasty. A lot of S's.
A lot of S's.
I actually took off one of the words because it's a trigger for some.
Well, oh, gosh.
Moist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some people don't like it.
Some people don't like it. I did it here on the stream. Yeah. No, it believe it or not, I think it's about 50% of people that sometimes like, oh, don't say that.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is, though.
Yeah, it is.
I guess I'll use
See,
swampy.
I would even say it's above moist at this point. That's why I have all these other different adjectives to describe it.
Sopping. I like sopping.
Sopping, yeah. See, you know what? We're also raising your weather thesaurus and weather words instead of just your
those
weather
word
cube.
of the day calendars.
Yeah.
Yeah. So today for me will be sopping.
I usually just call it a hot tub. It feels like a hot tub outside.
No, there it is. It feels like a hot tub. That's true.
right.
Oh, a sauna.
Sauna.
That's probably more than that word.
So our heat index, and I actually calculated these myself. Now the formula for heat index is complicated, but you literally can type in what you think the dew point's going to be and the max temperature. And I calculated a max 97 for us. Not saying that it won't be hotter than that, but I think Charlotte is going to hit a max of 97 for how we feel today, 99 on Tuesday, and around 100 degrees on Wednesday and Thursday. Now, we're about to go in the weeds, y'all, but I want to bring something up, and I thought this is really interesting. So I like my weather stats way too much that sometimes I look far into things, and this is what I looked into. Since 1973, this is as far back as I can put this data, these are the amount of hours that we spend at each temperature range. So per year, we spend 339 hours feeling like it's 90 degrees. But what I thought was really interesting is that we only spend on average about 24 hours per year feeling like it's 100 degrees. So those 200s that I had on there likely will only be less than an hour. So I wanted to put that in perspective. So far this year, 2025, we spent 25 hours at 90 and only 1 hour at 95. So the warmest we felt is 95. We are going to be exceeding that. And it's even rarer for us to hit that 105. At that point, we're usually talking about heat advisories and the real feel and those excessive heat warnings and stuff like that. Well, that technically is 110. But it's so rare once we get to that point. And the warmest Charlotte has ever gotten is actually hit 6 different times. Can anyone guess the hottest temperature we ever had in Charlotte history?
106?
Ooh, close.
Really? I wasn't even going to go above 100, maybe like a little. 101.
104. So we've hit 104 6 times, and we have not been able to pass it. So that's kind of the threshold. Now and the peak I think we've got is 111 is the hottest we've ever felt, which is kind of a nice little spot to be in. There's some areas that really exceed that excessively, but just wanted to bring up some of those stats because I thought it was interesting. But I'm going to actually jump to the 7-day forecast before we get into kind of our one rain chance of flood threat today. Okay. But this is where our actual air temperatures are going to be. We have 91 tomorrow, so 89 is the cool spot. This is technically the coolest day of the week, if you want to call it that. Feeling like 97. And 93 Wednesday, 90 on Friday, and officially with the last hour of the day, we're calling it summer because the summer solstice starts at 10:41 p.m. So that means this weekend is actually the first summer weekend, believe it or not. And we're actually up to 95 degrees, which would be our hottest temperature of the year on Sunday. Could be challenging 100 degrees again. We see a little dip in the mugginess on Friday and Saturday, but plain and simple, this is pretty much what you expect through July. We're just doing it a little bit earlier, so not really too much of an anomaly overall. Moving forward for our rain chances, you're going to notice that some bars are higher than others. And once it loads, we'll take its time. There it is. You're seeing really just more of a scattered rain environment, but it's not just that. We actually have a chance for some flash flooding. I think it's similar to what we had last Thursday. So last Thursday, we had a trough that was over the area, and that led to one storm after another, really slow movers. We have a front to the northeast of us, and that's why you have the area yellow for our excessive impacts for any rainfall. And then we do have a flood watch for some of our select counties. It's really interesting where we live because of the division of National Weather Service offices. So Stanley, Richmond, and Anson County are actually covered by Raleigh's National Weather Service. Watauga and Ashe County, the two counties that you see outlined for the mountains, that's covered by Blacksburg up in Virginia. And the rest is Greenville, Spartanburg, and then we have 2 counties to the south, Lancaster and Chesterfield. They're actually Columbia. So sometimes it's a nightmare for some of these maps. So if you're ever wondering why is it inconsistent, they all have to agree. But Greenville Spartanburg right now, and I was talking to the chat, does not agree that we have the criteria for a flood watch any further west. So that's the reason why you kind of see that broken, weird little jets. Nothing's really uniform going on. They could compromise and maybe add Rowan County to the mix, maybe Iredell. Just letting you know that I think anyone along the I-77 corridor and further off towards the east could have a torrential downpour that could lead to some flooding, because we have troughs, we have fronts, and we have moisture and heat for all the mixed together. Those are the big three. You need the hot and humid weather to be uplifted. Sometimes on their own they can drive, but if you have a trough, which is the dash line, which is just an area low pressure which rises things up, or a front, that's prime time. That's how you get storms, and that's exactly, I think, what we're going to see. So let's slow it down for you. First off, rain chances scattered today, not so much tomorrow, really becoming more isolated, and our rainfall chances after that. Looks like the only day that doesn't have at least a chance for a spotty storm is on Sunday. But roll tape, I think it's right around the magic hour of 1 to 2 that we start to see a few isolated storms. I think 2 to 4, there's a chance that just one stray storm pops up and kind of dances around. Really from about 4 to 7, that's where they become more scattered, even becoming numerous across the area. But as you can see, they're especially populated further off towards the east. So that does align with that flood watch. So the general rule, the further east that you go, better chance for a little bit of flooding. And this will continue through the evening. Then once the sun sets, we lose a lot of the energy and the storms start to fade out. And then we rinse and repeat. However, the second rinse will not be as long. I think you just see a couple of storms popping up through the afternoon. Not as widespread of a map, and watch what happens when I go all the way to Wednesday. You barely have anything, truly just isolated nature. So by far today is the best chance for rain, best chance for flooding. We're not going weather alert today because truly we could go weather alert for every single day that has a chance for flooding, and we're going to be wrong 95% of the time. That one that happens on Thursday where some of us had the flash flood warning that was considerable. Brad actually brought a really an interesting fact. I have to learn actually where he found this data, but that would actually be considered a 500-year flooding event for Tyvola Road alone for how unique the rain was in that section. So I thought that was very interesting there. Yeah. So those type of deals don't always pop up. However, today would be in line for a better chance for that overall.
All right, as far as this week's plans, because selfishly I have family visiting. My sister-in-law on Wednesday might go to a Knights game. I think they're home this week.
Yeah, Bark in the Park on Wednesday.
Bark in the Park.
Bark in the Park. Okay, so maybe not Wednesday, but Thursday we're looking pretty good, just sopping.
Yeah, Thursday, if you're going to a Knights game especially, it's going to be torrential downpours the whole time. It's going to be it's the worst case scenario. No, I'm joking, of course. This is a chance for an isolated storm. You know that. What you do is you go under, go get a drink, go get a hot dog, and then
they have hot dog specials then.
They do have. What do you know?
$1 dogs.
So I think that was it.
Ooh, that's
nice.
What attracted me. See, go get a discounted dog if that happens.
All right, so
whenever these environments, it's weird, but I do it. I always say bring a small towel with you just in case there's a downpour, because then you can go there and just dry your seat. The attendants usually can do it for you, but you can kind of beat that curve.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Very good. Carlene, any questions?
No. Did you have a good Father's Day?
I did have a great Father's Day.
You played
actually.
golf?
How was
Yep.
golf?
Golf's great. Went to Skybrook in Huntersville, which is much better than some of the more public courses I'm used to when there's like 500-yard courses and stuff like that, or foot courses or whatever it is. And then my sides are still a little sore because I guess I'm not really used to golfing that much.
Yeah.
My obliques.
It'll kill my back for a while.
No, but it was wonderful. Big shout out to my wife. Yesterday was awesome. Yeah, my wife Kim and JT made a very special day. We went monster golfing. Wow. You guys familiar?
No.
Oh, it's pretty cool. It's in University City, and it literally is just glow in the dark type of things where it has a bunch of neon paint, and it has like monsters and stuff and a little arcade. So I thought that he would enjoy that, and I got the high score on the basketball game.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm really good at that little hot shot. So
sounds like a great Father's Day
weekend.
It
was.
Very nice. All right, well, we thank you, as usual. We will just kind of, bring the little towel, know that it's going to be hot.
It's summer.
It's summer.
Bring a fan.
It's sopping. Oh, I do like those those fans.
Those are
the
nice,
little-
especially with the misters.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's key. That's
Mhm.
key. All right, all the things you need to know as we raise your weather IQ on,
Everything.
preparing with hair and fans. Okay. Thanks, Chris Mulcahy again here at the Live Impact Studio giving us our weather for today and what we can look forward to this week. Coming up at 9:50 right now, I want to get you an update on some breaking news. Out of Lake Norman, there was a report of a drowning Saturday night. An update this morning from North Carolina Wildlife. That drowning, the incident occurring Saturday night at 6 o'clock on Lake Norman in an area north of Lake Norman State Park. The operator of a boat voluntarily left a vessel trying to retrieve a personal item that had blown overboard, and that male never surfaced. There was a female occupant who entered the water as well, trying to look for the man. And the woman also began having difficulty swimming, is what they're saying. And the boat then drifted away. Wow, this woman eventually rescued from the water by Iredell County Sheriff's Office, as well as North Carolina Wildlife officers. And then from passing boaters, the woman was taken to the hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. The search for the male operator of the boat was suspended due to weather Saturday night. It was resumed yesterday morning, and yesterday morning around 10:30, the missing boater was located by Cheryl's Ford and Rescue, transported to Lake Norman State Park boat ramp, where he was received and then transported by medical examiner staff. So it appears that we're confirming the death now of the male boater from an incident that occurred Saturday night on Lake Norman. All right, so it really stresses the importance of boater safety as we reach the peak of boating season and the enjoyment out on our beautiful lakes across the Carolinas. You need to have a vest on you as well, as required by law. Let's go.
Also, I want to mention a lot
Please,
of local municipalities and stuff, especially around. I know Lake Wiley does it. I'm pretty sure Lake Norman does it. They do free inspections.
Right.
So before you go out, they'll go through your kit and make sure you have the flare and enough life jackets and all of that. So I guess contact your local department around
Right,
here,
right,
or
yeah, and it's free, and I mean,
I know DNR in South Carolina does it
Uh-huh.
quite often. So
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things too where it should just be part of your prep for boating season.
Yep.
Just get it inspected. Just do all the right things, because unfortunately we report on these situations quite often throughout the summer. So bear in mind, that's a great reminder, Carlene, get your boat and all of the things that are required inspected for free. Want to keep you safe this summer. Okay, take you back out to Washington, D.C. with the Religious Liberty Commission hearing that is underway. It is happening live, and that's what we do here on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus.
Heavy move was to control religion from the top down. So again, where did their extraordinary political courage come from? Well, their trust in divine providence is surely one reason. But providence is fully compatible with human persons' free cooperation in God's plan. Indeed, providence presupposes that freedom. God helps those who help themselves. The founders chose freely and without precedent the epochal, uncharted path of freedom, with eyes wide open. But why did they do that? Because they were convinced that government's obligation to preserve and protect religious liberty is a true principle of justice and political morality. Freedom of religion for all is the only valid conclusion they could draw from a series of truths they held most firmly, though I think not, as a matter of fact, self-evidently, but call the nest of these truths, these propositions, the moral foundations of religious liberty. Now, where shall we look for a compact expression of them, those moral foundations? Well, we could look to the founding generation's preeminent guide to constitutional meaning, to the guiding force behind our First Amendment, and to the author of what the Supreme Court, or what Supreme Court justices, liberal and conservative, have all treated as the Magna Carta of American religious liberty. I speak not of three men here, but of one, James Madison. And I speak of his 1785 pamphlet against the Virginia tax for the support of ministers, the pamphlet called The Memorial and Remonstrance. And indeed, I'll just talk about the very first paragraph of it. Madison wrote that religious liberty is not about the sovereignty of the human person, what we might call subjective right. Much less was religious liberty about that idiosyncratic creativity expressed by the Supreme Court in 1992 in its infamous or famous mystery passage. For Madison and the founders, there was a sovereign in the picture, an omniscient and good one. Madison wrote, "Before any man can be considered a member of civil society, he must be considered as a subject of the governor of the universe." Now, this subject was not for Madison or the other founders a law unto himself. Religious liberty as an inalienable right, or was an inalienable right according to Madison, because, Madison wrote, what is here a right towards men is a duty towards the Creator. This obligation is not like other important moral duties, which one fulfills by inaction. Thou shalt not. This duty to the Creator is a much heavier lift, and it's inalienable for a second reason, Madison wrote, because the opinions of men, depending only on the evidence contemplated by their own minds, cannot follow the dictates of other men. This freedom of conscience, conscientious belief, is not a license for indifferentism. It is an overriding call, moral call, to knuckle down and get serious, to do some very hard thinking about divine realities. Now, central to religion is one conscientiously judging what is the case about ultimate matters, and then acting according to what one judges to be the case. Now, this obviously can only happen if people are free of coercion and manipulation. Madison wrote, "It's the duty of every man to render to the Creator such homage, and such only as he believes to be acceptable to him. This is a duty that can only be fulfilled by free thought, judgment, decision, and subsequent action of each person. No one can perform it for you. If you don't do it, it don't get done." Now, note well, these moral foundations were not held by the founders as truths of religion. That was about what the denominations and the sects taught, revealed doctrines, the deliverances of prophets and sacred texts, ceremonies and charisms, and church precepts. The moral foundations of religious liberty, as we find them in Madison and across the founding, comprises truths about religion, about divine realities, human intelligence and free choice, and the political common good. These the founders thought to be truths to be accessible to unaided human reason. They're really more truths of political theory or actually of philosophy, not religion. So for that reason, there can be no sound argument, none that I can think of, that recovering these moral foundations of religious liberty, these truths about divine realities, human life, and the political common good, amount themselves to some sort of religious establishment. And we certainly should not suppose that Madison, for example, was foolish enough to argue for religious liberty in a memorial and remonstrance on grounds that we would call or would sound to people like a religious establishment. Now, the founders resolved to let the spirit of human inquiry and judgment blow where it wills, in the end because they were obliged to do that. obliged not by superior force or even, so far considered, by any revealed or revelatory act of God within human history. The founders were obliged by reason and conviction. They were compelled by truth. Now, the founders recognized two entailments, I'll call them, of what they wrought: their settlement, their experiment in religious liberty. One thing they recognize is this: unleashing the potentially disruptive forces of felt spiritual imperatives is risky. It is. So risky that no polity before theirs ever did it. Second, the founders recognized that in a free society like ours, the restraint, the virtue really necessary to good order, has to come from the character of the people, not from government dictates. At the intersection of these two lines of thought, these two entailments, stood religion. The founding generation all but universally held that the political commonweal, common good, depended upon the piety of the people. This is the message not only of Washington's justly famous farewell, the message of John Adams, it's the message also of Thomas Jefferson and pretty much everybody else at the founding. This pervasive judgment that religion supplies the ground for virtue, and virtue is necessary for freedom, this pervasive judgment, I would say, is not quite a moral foundation of religious liberty. I rather think of it as a morally adjacent truth of political wisdom. But there it is, nonetheless. Now, someone might now reheat an anti-establishment objection and serve it up right here against what I've been saying. Someone might say these affirmations about divine realities, etc., lack, if they're a basis for government action, lack a secular purpose, which is required for every government action. Now, this was indeed a demand, for an unfortunate season, of the Supreme Court's late, and I dare say unlamented, Establishment Clause test, the infamous three-part Lemon test, which was a gigantic mistake, which Justice Scalia 30 years ago likened, in his usual colorful language, Scalia speaking, the Lemon test is like a ghoul in a late-night horror movie that repeatedly sits up in its grave and shuffles abroad after being repeatedly killed and buried. Well, to continue with the colorful prose, finally the Lemon test has a stake buried through its heart, and it's really, really dead now. Now, the secular purpose objection, the secular purpose part of the Lemon test for that matter, I think is, in any event, question-begging wordplay. The wordplay goes like this. You see, religious and secular are opposites. So if government should act for the sake of religion, they must not be acting for a secular purpose, even if acting for religion opens onto or produces what we might call secular prosperity in a wide sense. Well, we don't need to think that way, and the founders most certainly didn't think that way. Let's instead work with the founders' words and concepts and think about government promoting religion for the sake of the common good. Now, the founders were keenly, even fearfully aware of the divide between this passing veil of tears and what they ubiquitously referred to as, the founders' terms, a future state of rewards and punishments. But the founders never used the term secular when they talked about religion and the polity. The closest they came to doing so was probably references to what they called worldly activities, which were mostly forbidden, on the Sabbath. For the founders, proper government care for the temporal common good included encouragement and help and recognition of religion, albeit always respectful of persons' freedom and churches' autonomy. In the founders' world, deploying the word secular would have added nothing to the discussion and probably confused everybody party to it. Now, in conclusion, I've spoken so far. I haven't really spoken specifically about constitutional interpretation of the religion clauses, And I should like to close by noting two takeaways from my remarks pertinent to constitutional interpretation. One is this: it's folly to think we can jettison what I've called the moral foundations of religious liberty and its moral adjacent, the people's virtue. I think it's folly to think we can jettison that is banish it from our thinking, and remain faithful to anything like the original understanding of the religion clauses. The other takeaway is that no matter what is true with other constitutional provisions, here, at the keystone of our constitutional civil liberties, here with religious liberty, there is no need for the contemporary interpreter on or off a court, interpreter of the constitutional language, to choose between history and justice, to choose between historical recovery of the plain meaning of the text and what surely appears to be the moral truth of the matter. For in the case of the religion clauses, the founders wove truth into the text in a tapestry for the ages.
Thank you. Kelly?
I guess I have a question for each. First, Mark, first, thank you for literally a life of service for religious freedom and what you've done. I really do. I'm thankful for both of you. Mark, I want to start with you. I know Ms. Ho mentioned in her opening remarks this issue, and since you litigate in this area, of judges trying to avoid and creating things so that they don't rule for people in these cases. I'd just like you to give your experience on that, whether you think that's true, and then if there's any recommendation or anything we could recommend to the President. I don't know if there is, but I think there could be. And then Professor Bradley, I know this afternoon we're going to get to more cases and all this, but you've had such a wide background on this. I would love to get your idea. You mentioned the Lemon case being overturned, our Kennedy case that we did a few years ago, but what do you think is the next big thing that should go if we're going to have more religious freedom? And then if you have any ideas how to move us in that way, I'd love that as well.
Thanks, Kelly. Happy to discuss it. There's something that I think is true of judges, but I think it's also true of people who work in all levels of state and federal government, which is sometimes you get up or sometimes you encounter a situation and you're just not all that eager to do the job. And I think one thing this commission can and should do is call on all of our public servants, and I really do think it's across the board, to remind them that they have an obligation, right? I mean, if you wear the robes or if you took the oath of office to be a state legislator or a federal legislator, or you work in the agency someplace, you have a duty to advance and uphold religious freedom for everyone. And that means you have a job to decide the hard cases and to work through the difficult situations. Nobody ever said this was all easy or simple. Nobody ever said every case was easy or simple. But nothing gets better when you kick those cans down the road and say, well, we'll let a few more families get messed up or a few more churches get closed. That's not a win for anybody. So to the extent this commission can highlight those things and encourage people to really do the job, and letting things linger for a long time, choosing to not decide to let parents have their rights to raise their children the way they want, for example, that's just harming people, and our whole system of government should do better.
Kelly, to put it bluntly, I think it's time to kick in the rotten door that's barring religion from the public square. And what I mean, maybe a little bit more helpfully than that, or less cryptically than that, over the last 20 years, the Supreme Court, at the behest or at the urging of people like Mark Rienzi, Becket Fund, ADF, First Liberty, has issued a series of rulings that bit by bit have reintroduced religion into the public square. And finally, the court is over with the Lemon test, and the first part of it is government has to have a secular legislative purpose. But the Supreme Court has done everything to prepare the way for it to say something now, which it has yet to say, and should say, which is that promoting religion for the sake of religion and its ulterior benefits to the polity is fine. To date, even with the many good decisions we've had in the 21st century, the Supreme Court would still is beholden to a view that I would describe as a kind of hangover of secularism, that it's always looking for a secular side benefit or collateral effect of action that government takes, which has in some way an effect of promoting religion. We're always looking to call legislative prayer, for example, a way to solemnize the occasion, for example, rather than say, we're praying here. So everything is set for the court to do that, and I think it should do that at the earliest opportunity.
Dr. Anderson?
Great, thank you. I thought both opening remarks were outstanding, and so thank you both to Mark and Jerry. And I have a question for each of you. Mark, at one point you mentioned just in passing that government can't violate religious liberty except for certain rare exceptions. And sometimes I think thinking about those exceptions can actually be really helpful for highlighting what the foundation is. The way that I've thought about this in my own kind of research and writing is that all of our natural liberties have natural limits. And so government isn't violating my natural right to free speech when it says you can't publish obscenity, because the right to free speech never included obscenity to begin with. It doesn't violate my liberty when it says you can't rape, pillage, and plunder, because I never had a liberty right to rape. So what are those natural limits to religious liberty? Just so we can think through, like, what is within the scope and what's outside of the bounds. And then, Jerry, I love your, some people want to have public religion but no liberty. Other people want to have liberty but no public religion. The founders wanted both. Can you help us think about how we've done that historically? How have we, as a nation, both promoted religion publicly and protected religious liberty?
Thank you, Ryan. Here's the way I would suggest thinking about the limits on religious liberty. Like, when can the government force somebody to violate his or her religion? The short answer is it should be very, very rare. It should be where there's something the government needs to achieve, and the only way to do it is to force someone to violate his or her religion. So if my religion is to sacrifice children to Moloch, or to drive the wrong way on the Beltway when I get out of here this afternoon, I don't win that case, right? The government has a compelling reason to stop me, and it really has to stop me, otherwise I'm going to kill other people. Otherwise I'm going to do something terribly dangerous. That's almost never the case in most religious liberty cases, because thankfully most people don't claim a religious right to kill their children or drive the wrong way on the Beltway. Here's one benefit to massive, overwhelming government that is involved in every aspect of every one of our lives, right? We probably all have different opinions on that. My opinion's kind of negative toward that. But here's a positive about it, right? The massive government that has 9,000 tentacles and has 50 zillion agencies you've never heard of, guess what? It can get its work done without forcing nuns to give out contraception. It can get its work done in almost every single case without forcing American citizens to violate their religion. And so in an era of big, powerful government, the answer is those limits are really rare, because almost all the time the government can get its job done without coercing violations of faith.
So the best way I can answer your question, Ryan, is to take two traditions, which were vibrant traditions from the founding on until sometime within the memory of some people still living, like me. Now, these are two traditions that have been battered and limited and diminished by Supreme Court decisions, other court decisions, government action of a general kind, and also the cultural drift away from religious observance. But I think both of these traditions are still alive and should be revivified. Now, one is just public recognition of truths about divine realities, starting with prayer in legislative assemblies, chaplains in the military, but also in public speeches and public expression. I mean, it's not that long ago where the terminology of providence and, for the most part, in fact, biblical faith, were a part of political discourse. And I don't mean just the high points like Lincoln's second inaugural, which is justly famous for its sort of awful rendition of providence and divine judgment. But there is a tradition of recognition of these truths of philosophy, very often called natural religion, which were part of the civic furniture for hundreds of years, and now remain almost as bleached or whited sepulchres. So as I said, not puckishly to Kelly, more seriously, the Supreme Court has upheld legislative prayer on the ground that it's not really prayer. It's a kind of sacred-sounding verbal salad which has the effect intended to settle down people, to signal the meeting is beginning, and solemnize the occasion. So we could revivify this tradition, but not be embarrassed by it. And the other is to continue, revivify, but continue the tradition of what you could call government-religious partnerships, which are present at the beginning, and at a time, and for most of our history, the federal government, I know it's hard to believe for people present, the federal government's budget wasn't in the trillions back in the Washington administration. The federal government had very little infrastructure or capacity to do anything that we would call social service work by itself. So there was a tradition from the founding until the day before yesterday of creative partnership between government and religion, religious groups, religious bodies, to supply social services, education, etc. Now that should be done, and all of this should be done with respect for people's freedom. So none of this suggests in the slightest, or I don't think it should suggest in the slightest, that Jehovah's Witnesses school children should actually be compelled to salute the flag after all, because they're truths of natural religion. No, but all of this should be respectful of people's freedom.
You are watching Live Impact News on WCNC Plus at 10:15 Monday morning. I'm Jane Monreal, and we thank you for downloading the WCNC Plus app to your Roku, Fire, or Apple TV and spreading the word, because the news is sort of run through this studio differently. It comes in somewhat raw and unedited and unfiltered, and as we get the pictures and videos, we bring that out to you. So we take a little break from the Religious Liberty Commission that is having a hearing out of Washington, D.C. that we're picking up live to give you this update out of Statesville. A story right now. We want you to take a look at your screen here. This is a suspect wanted in a shooting. Austin Ty Kim or Kimby Morrison for a shooting that happened on Saturday afternoon at a house in Statesville near Denton Street and Abernathy Ball Field. So police do say that they did find a person, a victim, 33-year-old Timmy Jarvis Moore, suffering from multiple gunshot wounds. He was taken to Iredell Memorial Hospital where he later died. And there was a separate shooting, they're saying not related to the first incident, but that also happened over the weekend, also in Statesville, occurring early Saturday morning on East Allison Street, where someone shot and killed 25-year-old D'Angelo Mounsday Barker. They found him shot in the chest around 5:30 Saturday morning. He died at the scene. But again, we do know that one shooting suspect is wanted by the police, Austin Ty Kimby Morrison, for a shooting in Statesville where at least one person died from his injuries. All right. An update from there. We do know that President Trump is scheduled to be in Alberta, Canada today for a full day of the G7 summit, where he will be speaking to the Canadian Prime Minister. And he sounds pretty optimistic about reaching some trade deals and some positive talks about the economy and relations with not only Canada, but some of the other allies in that group, including Mexico. All right, take you back out now to Washington, D.C., where again the Religious Liberty Commission is having a hearing today, and Pam Bondi, Attorney General, is expected to deliver opening remarks at some point later on this morning or early this afternoon. Again, you're watching Live Impact News on WCNC Plus.
Everyone should be able to freely seek God and freely, as Jerry was citing James Madison, freely respond to the duty to the Creator, and that the power of government shouldn't be crushing someone who has the wrong views. And I will say that strain of human nature, right, which was initially wielded by the Puritans against the Quakers and others, and I think it originally comes from fervent religious belief, right, conviction that you're right, and therefore I must crush the guy who's wrong. That has lasted, but these days, frankly, I don't think it so much comes from religious people trying to use government to stamp out people with unpopular views. I think it's now more often anti or a-religious folks who want to wield the government to stamp out views that are wrong. And I think the truth is, whether it's the religious people or the opponents of religion, it's wrong, and it's wonderful that the United States has moved away from that, and we should continue trying.
Well, it's a not only a terrific question, it's a question. How does a government which takes my advice and decides to reclothe the public square with religion avoid violating the rights of people, maybe especially non-believers, but let's just say the rights of people? And that is the kind of thing where I think if I were watching a TV commercial, this is where it would say, this is an expert driver, don't try this at home. That is to say, before you try to promote religion, you better give a lot of thought to how you're going to do it without compromising people's rights. Now, I think it can be done, but it is something that has to be considered carefully for the very good reason that Madison cited. I mean, I don't think God wants insincere religious worship. I don't myself think God wants people to worship because that's what's done around here. I think worship that's pleasing to God, this is my own conviction. I don't know what Madison for sure thought, but my own conviction is that's what God wants. He wants people to freely come to God with conviction, owning their religion, believing in what they're doing. So you might say, I think believers need to constitute themselves and own their religion, and that can't be done save freely. So for the sake of religion, it is religious freedom. But one way that we can promote, I think we can see our way to promote religion respectful of freedom, but in a way that doesn't compromise anybody's rights, is to maybe repackage something that Madison said. He certainly held it, and what I was trying to say, which is this: we should come to recognize religion as a common good, even if not everybody's religious. And even if some people, maybe they're not religious, don't think religion is a common good. Quite a lot like education. I mean, we do think of education as a common good, and government does a great deal to supply it, promote it, and pay for it. I'm not saying that's exactly what we should do with religion, but even people who don't believe in education or think that universities are half frauds and half dangerous, any number of people may have reasons to think that education as it's practiced today is not a common good, but really just what some people have managed to get the government to pay for them. But I think that's false. No matter what you think of today's educational system, having an educated citizenry is good for all of us. It's good for democracy. And as the founders most certainly did think, and I think, having a religious and virtuous citizenry is good for everybody, frankly, even people who lack virtue and don't believe in religion.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Dr. Phil?
In the interest of just kind of having a conversation before we move on to the next question, can I ask a follow-up here?
Yes, of course.
Because we're talking about the government promoting religion, and that kind of gets a little scary sometimes, promoting, because nobody's a blank slate, and excuse me, and everybody comes to a situation with a bias. Nobody is bias-free. Everybody has some preconceived notion of an issue when they come to it, and when you see people behaving some way in pattern, then those in power are either eliciting, maintaining, or allowing that in some way. They're not neutral. They're either eliciting it, or they're doing something to maintain what's already happening, or they're at least passively allowing it to go on. There's some role. You cannot not choose. Not choosing is a choice, right? That's the fifth choice. You can come to the crossroads out in the middle of the country. You can go left, right, back, or forward, or you can just stand in the middle of the intersection and get run over. That's the fifth choice. You cannot not choose. So, and when you say to promote, are we talking about promoting religion, or are we talking about promoting liberty to choose religion if that's what you choose? Because if we're promoting religion, that's different than promoting choice. And I'm curious, what is it we're promoting? If you're saying promote.
Well, I think I might disagree with you. I think I understand what you're asking, and it deserves a better and a richer answer than I can give it, at least in these time constraints. But I don't think I agree with you that there's a tension or a difficulty with envisioning promoting religion at the same time you're promoting its free observance and appropriation by people. And an example that may be illuminating, it's not an analog, but it's something similar, would be family and marriage. I mean, the government, a political community ought to promote marriage and family as good things and help people who choose to be married and to have a family successfully do so. So there are aids to education of children and all sorts of possibilities for benefiting married couples. But nobody has to get married. In our country, you're free to reject marriage. You're free to think marriage is just another scam by the man. You're free to do that. But nonetheless, I think we do promote marriage and family. We should promote marriage and family. But I think it's fair to say you're free to decide that for yourself, not only in terms of getting married, but also whether you agree with the government's promotion of marriage as a good thing. You may think it's not.
But are you saying that's true for religion as well, that we should promote religion, but yet people are free not to do it if they want to?
Pretty much. I mean, promote it as a good thing. It's a good thing, but it's not. It's only a good thing if people choose to buy into it. Education, to some extent,
I for one think my bias is that religion is a good thing.
Yeah.
And for the first time in our country's history, participation in organized religion has dropped below 50% for the first time in our country's history. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that, and probably the most operative is that our birth rate has dropped so low, and one of the primary reasons people join the church is to have their children baptized or whatever. So that may be the most operative reason, but nonetheless, it's dropped below 50% for the first time in our country's history, which I think is a very sad reality, because that's a great glue, as I said earlier, that holds the family together, and they worship together, and there's also the sense of community that comes with that quiet time together and coming together as a community. So I personally have, my bias is that it's a good thing, but I don't know that everybody would share that. That would be my bias if I was bringing it to the situation.
I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Phil. Rabbi?
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to explore, building on the eloquent testimony of both witnesses, the connection between free exercise right and other aspects of the Bill of Rights. So, Mr. Rienzi, you movingly referred to the story of the Gobaitis case and then the Barnett rectification of Gobaitis. So let's use that for a moment to explore the connection between free exercise and free speech. In one of the lamentable religious liberty decisions by the court that still has yet to go, Employment Division versus Smith, the majority in that case argued, among other things, that the Barnett case, the pledging allegiance case or saluting the flag case, is a special case because it is what the court called one of hybrid rights. Mm-hmm. It involves not only religious liberty but also freedom of speech, to which Michael McConnell, I think, rightly responded that, in truth, acts of religious exercise are very often, if not almost always, also forms of expression. If I am wearing a yarmulke or one is wearing a cross, obviously one is not just engaging in a form of religious observance, but of expression of faith. Pastor White referred movingly to the case of one being prosecuted for silently praying, which is, of course, both a case of religious liberty as well as speech. So I'm interested in the intersection of religious liberty and religious speech. And then regarding Professor Bradley's testimony, which I'm entirely in sympathy with in terms of rediscovering a better understanding of the role of faith in society and government's role in helping to bring about that. I'd love some thoughts on what would a better understanding of the Constitution's reference to a prohibition on religious establishment actually be. Members of the Commission have themselves referred to, as Tocqueville did, the importance of the separation between what my colleagues called altar and throne in America. On the other hand, we've clearly gone wrong somewhere. I think George Washington, who wrote that wonderful letter to the Jews of Newport, would be a kind of surprise to learn that the Supreme Court had decided that, say, a rabbi giving a non-denominational prayer in high school graduation, or a state legislature creating a school district to help special needs Hasidic children, was considered by the courts a dangerous encroachment on constitutional boundaries, and yet we've had those decisions. So, what would a better understanding of the reference to religious establishment be, and how would that relate to a better facilitation of faith in the public square? Mr. Ranzi, maybe we'll begin with you.
Yeah, so Justice Scalia, who wrote the Smith decision, which was a mistake, in a different decision said, a free speech clause without religious speech is like Hamlet without the prince. And he was right then. He was wrong in Smith, but he was right about speech. Free speech, parental rights, all sorts of other rights are very, very closely tied to religious liberty, and when you cut back on religious liberty, you endanger the others. Religious liberty also can't just be an equality right. It can't just be, we got to treat everybody the same. That would work if we all had one religion. If we all had the same religion, then treating us all exactly the same would protect each of our free exercise. Like that would be fine in a place where we were twins. But we're not, right? This is a religiously diverse place, and so to protect religious liberty for a religiously diverse people, you're going to need to protect something different for the Muslim and for the Jew and for the Native American and for the Catholic and for the Protestant and everybody else. And so when we artificially shrink our rights down, and when we cut them down to something like just an equality principle, and we don't give full protection to the free exercise of different religious faiths, we're really shortchanging the religious liberty right, but also things like speech and parental rights that are really the bedrock of our civilization.
Thank you.
Members, we're pushing the clock just a little bit here on our first set of witnesses, and we want to stay on time. So Allison and the bishop, we'll close it. And is everybody else okay? Paula, do you have a question? Allison?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ideas have consequences, and what happens in the ivory hallways of the academy and courtrooms doesn't stay there. It has real impacts on real people. And I was struck that both of you, when you were referring to religion, Mr. Renzi, you spoke of it as a freedom to live out our faith. Professor Bradley, you talked about acting on what one believes. And it seems to me there's a misconception that religion in the clauses is really limited to worship. And I think that really expands the power of government and how it can intrude on the sphere. At the same time, it shrinks individual liberty and freedom. So I just wanted I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on that problem and what we can do to sort of restore a more proper and capacious understanding of religion.
I'll just say simply that, one, that's a great point, and one that it would be great for this commission to work on emphasizing and making in public quite a bit. And the easiest answer is that the word is exercise, right? It's the free exercise of religion, which means not just you get to believe whatever you want in your head, but you get to act like it's true within very, very broad limits, right? For the most part, you get to do that. And so if we're going to protect the free exercise of different religious beliefs, we're going to have to give room for people to act on them. And I agree with you, sometimes our courts historically have had a much smaller scope for that, right? You can believe what you want, you can tell your kids when they get home that they were sinning, but when I get them back in the schoolhouse, I get to make them do what I want. That's, again, that's not liberty.
I think it's probably true, Commissioner Hode, that at the founding and for a long time thereafter, worship, public worship, was the quintessential religious activity or central religious activity. There was a way in which it had a certain priority of visibility and perhaps importance. So there is some reason to treat it as primary, but not any reason I can think of that's a good reason to treat it as somehow exclusively what religion's about. Religion really, I think, is about self-constitution, vis-a-vis transcendent source of meaning and value, and whatever one holds that to be. So it really involves organizing your entire life around a connection and an attempt to be in harmony with God or the transcendent principle or whatever you call it. Now, obviously, there are a dramatic number of limits on anybody's freedom to do what they want, but I do think that there is a material in our tradition that should be emphasized, and it goes all the way back to the founding, of religion being a kind of encompassing part, not an encompassing part, but really the encompassing canopy of one's entire perspective and existence. Again, it doesn't mean that it doesn't have any anarchic implications. There's order and there's respecting other people's rights, to be sure, but I think we should treat worship as, maybe even today, somehow prototypical or central, but it's a mistake to make it the sum and substance of religion. And it's just a mistake.
Bishop, and if on your answers you can give us good answers now a little bit at the end. You guys have been terrific, so just we'll make a little succinct. Bishop?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the two presentations. I found them both really stimulating. As you were talking, I kept thinking about the great Vatican II statement, Dignitatis Humanae, on religious liberty, one of whose principal architects was the great Jesuit John Courtney Murray, who argued a long time ago that the principles of natural law provide a sort of basis for peace among, let's say, the potentially warring religions, a sort of common moral consensus, natural religion, if you want, and all that. It seems to me everyone around this table would kind of hold to the principles of natural law. But you also cited the infamous Casey decision in 1992. It belongs to the nature of liberty to decide the meaning of my own life and the meaning of the universe, this wildly over-the-top statement, which is now, it seems to me, the default position of almost every teenager in America, right? I decide everything. Here's my question. What do we do when the natural law consensus has evanesced, which I think it largely has among a lot of people in our country? Because religious liberty, as we've been talking about it, as the founders talked about it, as John Courtney Murray talked about it, is grounded in this shared consensus. What do we do? I think that's our challenge. What do we do when Casey versus Planned Parenthood is now the default position of most people?
You fight back against it with truth. The truth is the Casey principle is an empty thing to organize your life around, and you stand up and you say it as often as you can until people see it and realize it.
I agree. I mean, I think the Casey principle is basically, it's a value judgment. It's not in any way neutral. The value judgment is everything that counts in what you do and what you believe is authenticity, that it's really you. What it is you believe and do doesn't much matter at all as far as value is concerned. It's all about your individuality and asserting your stance and identity. I think, besides refuting it with truth, and this is maybe not in a way helpful advice, but I think we're seeing it sort of run its course already. It's demonstrating itself to be an empty promise of creativity and authenticity. It's actually a dead end and kind of a prison of emotion and something else. So, and again, I wish that the end of this course would come sooner rather than later, but I dare say we're on a course, it's on a course to a kind of extinction.
Last quick point I'd make is if you want to figure out what's been wrong for the last 30 or 40 years in our law, it was that Casey gives that view of liberty at the same time that, until the last 15 years, we had a stingy view of religious liberty that was actually directly protected in the text of the Constitution. That's a problem. That's something this commission should help us straighten out.
I am going to I recognize Carrie because you were way in the queue earlier and I missed you, so go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to know about the Supreme Court case in 1962, the prayer case. Do you believe, I would like both of you to answer, do you believe and recognize that after that case, we saw a significant decline in morality? We saw suicide rates increase, we saw teenage pregnancies increase, we saw divorce rates increase. Do you believe that prayer should be included in school as it was for 200 years when the students used to read the New England Primer and obviously have prayer in school and have the Bible as their textbook? What significance do you believe and detriment did the 1962 Supreme Court case have on all Americans?
Well, I myself treat that case, apart from the particular context, prayer in schools, which, as you're saying or suggesting, is an immensely consequential thing. I do think that was the real declaration of independence by the justices from the constitutional tradition. You know, they had indicated this direction as early as 1947, but the Engel case in 1962 is where the Supreme Court just cuts itself off from the tradition and declares itself the harbinger or custodian of secularism. So I think it's a bad decision for that reason. The other thing I say, I don't myself know what the consequences or what cause and effect is with regard to the consequences after 1962, and I don't dispute or wonder about anything you said. But I would add this, that the Engel case, which is the 62 school prayer case, I should say the Supreme Court decided that on the assumption, they took it over as their given, that it was truly voluntary prayer. Now, some people may doubt that that's the way it works in a grade school classroom, but the Supreme Court decided that case on the grounds that it was voluntary prayer, which would have to be in light of the Barnett case from 1943. And the content of the prayer in 1962, the New York Regent's prayer, was little more, wasn't anything more than a short collection, compact collection of the truths that Madison and all of the founders affirmed. Almighty God, we thank you and we implore your blessings upon our country, our families, and our community. Almighty God, we give our thanks to you. And it really is just a recognition of God's existence and providential care for humankind. So it wasn't a prayer that should be called sectarian. Even in contrast to the 1963 case, the Schempp case, which had to do with Bible reading from the King James Version of the Bible. That's actually a different situation. But the New York Regent's prayer case, Engel, I think, was a sharp, bad turn at several levels of thinking about it.
Thank you. Thank you, Carrie. I just have one quick question with a short answer, if you can. Almost every decision that has been made regarding religious liberty has come from the courts. Almost every decision that has taken the wrong turn at the court level. The founders believe this should be left to the states and the state legislatures. Do you believe if the courts had stayed out of this, which they had for a long time, and left to the will of those elected by the people, that the legislators in this country would have made these same decisions and passed these same laws? And I say that coming from Texas, where we just passed Senate Bill 10 to put the 10 Commandments in every classroom, and Senate Bill 11 to put prayer voluntarily back in our schools. Because I question if the Congress or if state legislatures would have done what the courts have done.
I don't know if they would have done what the courts have done either, but I'd caution that I think it's a dangerous world to say we want the courts out of these things. I think the point of the Bill of Rights is that there are some principles that everybody's supposed to apply, but the courts ultimately do need to protect and step in occasionally. The law in Gobitis was from a local school board and legislature too, so I think sometimes those entities will get it right, sometimes they will get it wrong, but I do think we need a system that protects minority rights and sort of ensures that they get it right. All that said, courts obviously quite often get it exactly wrong, and that's dangerous, and that's why we have to work hard to fix it.
Yeah, I think there's an essential, an important role for courts. I agree completely with Mark Rienzi. The only thing I would add, it's an adaptation of something that is attributed at least to Bill Buckley, which was Bill Buckley said at one point he'd rather be ruled by the first 200 people in the Cambridge phone book than the Harvard faculty. My adaptation of it is to say, I think over the last 2 generations, we would have been much better off, all told, with regard to religion, if the people had had more to say about how we would integrate religion in public life than the courts, in fact, have had over the last 2 generations.
Well, and Harvard is obviously still a problem. I want to thank our 2 witnesses. Please give them a round of applause. Thank you. Thank you. You may be excused. I'm checking because I can't quite see, it's dark backstage, if our Attorney General is here yet. Do I have any staff update on that? Our next witness is Dr. Mark David Hall.
You are watching Live Impact
Professor
News here on WCNC Plus. As you're taking a look there at the Religious Liberty Commission hearing again, they are expecting to see Attorney General Pam Bondi, who is supposed to be making opening remarks at some point this morning. So they alluded to that she might be backstage. But as we are awaiting Ms. Bondi to come here on the camera, just want to let you know that in York County, a traffic situation I want to warn you about northbound on I-77 over Cherry Road. A couple of the right lanes taken away around mile marker 82, right, Carlene?
It's one of the big.
It's a big one?
It's a big one. It's a busy one for Rock Hill.
So they are saying, expect major delays here.
Yeah.
All right. And they are saying that these repairs are expected to be finished by the end of the day. So that will certainly affect the afternoon, evening drive. Yes. Alternates should be posted, but just expect delays, something to factor in for later on today. Just want to let you know from SCDOT. In the meantime, we are also awaiting a press conference from Minnesota, from the state lawmakers that were shot over the weekend. An update from them. They did capture the suspected shooter in what they're saying is a politically motivated attack on some state leaders there in Minnesota. And President Trump in Canada today for the G7 summit, where he is expected to hold a meeting this morning with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. In the meantime, let's get you back over to the Religious Commission commission hearing here on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus.
Jesus Christ himself, give unto Caesar what is Caesar, unto God what is God's. Tertullian, the early church father, is the first person to ever use the phrase religious liberty. And yet Wilkin recognizes, as he must, that when Christians came into political power, they succumbed to the temptation of using the power of the state, the power of civil rulers, to promote their understanding of true religion. And so from Emperor Constantine up to the early American colonies, it was too often the case that rulers would favor one manifestation of Christianity over others, punish dissenters, and this sort of thing. Unfortunately, very fortunately, things began to change in the 17th century. Now, we're oftentimes told a tale that religious liberty comes about for prudential reasons. People get tired of fighting each other over religion, or maybe the Enlightenment comes along and saves us from our bigotry. And there's something to both of these things, especially the prudential argument. But very, very important, I think, are arguments made by men like Roger Williams, William Penn, Isaac Backus, John Leland, Elisha Williams, people making explicitly Christian and biblical arguments in favor of the sacred right of conscience. Now, there are other sorts of arguments one could make, including excellent moral arguments, but in early America, where something like 98% of Americans of European descent are Protestant, 2% are Roman Catholic, and you have about 2,500 Jews in 4 or 5 American cities, these sorts of biblical arguments arguments were very, very persuasive. So by the time we get to the late 18th century, and well, especially during the First Great Awakening, those great series of revivals that swept America in the 1730s, 1740s, where a lot of these arguments were made. But by the time we get to the founding era, we have seen a major shift. So in the early colonies, again, you don't really have religious liberty. Sometimes you have religious toleration, sometimes you don't, right? Jews and Catholics are banned from both Massachusetts Bay and Virginia, for example. And yet by the time we get to the founding era, something had changed. All colonies had come to accept religious toleration. We'll put up with dissenters. And yet they're moving beyond that. They're moving to embrace religious liberty as a natural right. Let me give you my favorite illustration of this. So as the American colonies are breaking from Great Britain, pretty much every state rewrites its constitution and laws. In Virginia, George Mason was tasked with writing a Bill of Rights, and he came up with a religious liberty provision that's not bad. He writes that religion or the duty which we owe to our divine and omnipotent Creator and the manner of discharging it can be governed only by reason and conviction, not by force or violence, and therefore that all men should enjoy the fullest toleration of the exercise of religion according to the dictates of conscience, unpunished and unrestrained by the magistrate. Now that's not a bad religious liberty provision, but James Madison, in his first public act, he objects to that word toleration. He says that makes it sound as if we're just going to put up with you religious minorities. And he insisted instead that that provision be, that word be replaced to make it crystal clear that people have a natural right to the free exercise of religion. And the convention went along with Madison. And what we see in the founding era is that every state is coming to protect religious liberty, and it's very common to have language like George Mason's. Note that he's making an argument. He's not saying for prudential reasons or because the Enlightenment is now here. He's saying because we have a duty to our divine and omnipotent Creator, a duty that must be exercised in freedom and truth. Therefore, we must have this right. So every state is protecting religious liberty. The federal Constitution does not, but only because its advocates said the federal government simply does not have the power to restrict religious liberty. The anti-federalists were not convinced, and so they insisted on a Bill of Rights, and fortunately they did. And of course we end up with the First Amendment, which begins, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. The free exercise thereof. And we talked a little bit about earlier, I think it's crystal clear, it's absolutely clear that religious liberty protects more than the freedom of worship. It clearly protects it. It clearly protects freedom of belief, clearly protects freedom of worship, but it protects more. And to get into this, what I want to look at a little bit is religious accommodations or religious exceptions. So when you have a neutral law of general applicability, does the First Amendment require an exception? Now that is hotly contested even among originalists, and I'm not going to go down that path right now, but I want to make the point that the founders absolutely understood about religious exceptions or accommodations. The Constitution itself contains one, right? In each and every oath provision, people are given the ability to swear or affirm the oath. And the affirmation possibility is clearly aimed at Quakers and others who have religious scruples to swearing oaths. But I want to talk about something else, something even our libertarian friends would agree with. If the government has one job, it's national defense. It's protecting either the colony, the state, or the nation. Now, how have governments gone about doing this? Well, in early America, especially the early American colonies, generally they required militia service. Every male must serve in the militia. And yet again, you have those problematic Quakers and Brethren and Amish, and they say, we can't do this. We have religious objections to military service. Well, think about this from the government's perspective. What can the government do? It seems to me there's three obvious choices. One, a government could say, well, we really care about not making anyone go against his conscience, so we'll remove this requirement altogether. No one has to serve in the military. And yet, if conscription is really necessary for the national defense or colonial defense, and it really probably was for the early colonies, then you're putting the community in jeopardy by removing this requirement. Well, another possibility would be to say the law is the law. Everyone will serve, period. Too many countries do this, right? Can you imagine a Quaker saying to Vladimir Putin, excuse me, I can't serve in the Russian military. I have a religious objection. That person would probably not belong on this earth. Many countries have done this. Fortunately, in America, we have found a third way. Beginning as early as the 1670s, 70s, what colonies would do is they would permit Quakers and others to do alternative service or to hire a substitute or something like this. And by the time you get to the late 18th century, every colony and then every state is doing this. Congress affirms this in a statement of July 18, 1775. Congress said, as there are some people who, from religious principles, cannot bear arms in any case, this Congress intend no violence to their consciences, but earnestly recommend it to them to contribute liberally in this time of universal calamity to the relief of their distressed brethren in every several colonies, and to do other services to their oppressed country which they can consistently with their religious principles. And that's an important point. Religious liberty is not a get-out-of-duty-free card. You still have to serve, but we'll permit you to serve in a different way. Well, I could give a lot more evidence along these lines, but let me shift to a different question. Who is protected? And we've already talked about this a little bit, but I think it's very critical to understand that even in the late 18th century, America's founders understood that the answer to that is everyone. And so Article 6 of the Constitution bans religious tests for office. And anti-federalists objected. They said, well, this means a Jew or a Muslim or even an atheist could hold federal office. And the Federalists had to say, yes, that's a possibility. Now, they would oftentimes go on to say, well, that's unlikely to ever happen. And of course, they didn't understand how diverse our country has become, but they recognize it's a possibility. What I want to do instead is quote from, it's already been mentioned, but it's such a good letter, we should quote from it more than once, George Washington's letter to the Hebrew congregation in Newport, Rhode Island. Now, I've already said there's only about 2,500 Jews in America at the time. They really don't have much by way of political or economic power. This is not a constituency that needs to be cultivated. But George Washington wrote to this tiny religious minority, all possess alike liberty and conscience and immunities of citizenship. It is now no more that toleration is spoken of, as if was by the indulgence of one class of people that another enjoy the exercise of their inherent natural rights. For happily the government of the United States, which gives to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance, requires only that they who live under its protection should demean themselves as good citizens in giving it on all occasions their effectual support. A beautiful letter, a beautiful sentiment, and an important commitment. But Washington goes on, and this will bring me to my last point. Washington goes on to write this: may the children of the stock of Abraham who dwell in this land continue to merit and enjoy the goodwill of other inhabitants, while everyone shall sit in safety under his own vine and fig tree, and there shall be none to make him afraid. May the Father of all mercy scatter light and not darkness in our paths, and make us all in our several vocations usefully here, in his own due time in every way everlastingly happy. So there are 9 separate allusions to Scripture in this short paragraph, including to Micah 4:4, which was George Washington's favorite verse. And this highlights the last point I want to make. The founders were committed to religious liberty, but in no way, shape, or form did they think that religion must be scrubbed from the public square. Now, jurists and academics, we could go back to Hugo Black in that 1947 decision. He seizes on a metaphor from Thomas Jefferson, from a letter Jefferson wrote to the Danbury Baptist Association, where he talks about a wall of separation between church and state. And this is erroneous history that was embraced by far too many justices, far too many academics, far too many scholars, I'm sorry to say. Is this a useful metaphor? I want to suggest it is not. It's not even useful for Thomas Jefferson. You can see why the metaphor is appealing. It's one of the few documents that you could look at from this era to support anything approximating the strict separation of church and state. Jefferson, I'll skip ahead here because I'm running out of time, as a member of the Continental Congress, Jefferson proposed that the nation adopt a seal containing the image of Moses, extending his hand over the sea, casting to overwhelm Pharaoh, and the motto of the United States would be rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God. Literally 2 days after Jefferson wrote this letter to the Danbury Baptist, he went to church services in the U.S. Capitol building, where he heard John Leland, the great Baptist itinerant minister and himself an opponent of establishments, preach. Jefferson also made the War Department building and the Treasury Department building available for church services. Now, my point is not that Jefferson was an
You have been watching live from Washington, D.C. The commission hearing, a first one for the Religious Liberty Commission, taking place right now as they await for Attorney General Pam Bondi to make her opening remarks. You might have seen there in that 3-box on your screen, folks getting ready in Minnesota for a press conference. Just to let you know that we will be taking that here and playing that for you as it comes live. That will be on your secondary channel here on the WCNC app. So if you just exit this channel and then go back in, we are monitoring things